Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different today. Usually when people bring up the topic we're about to cover, they bring a corkboard, some red string, and about 6 different theories about the CIA or the mafia.
It is the ultimate rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spend a lifetime digging into it, and you will never, ever find the bottom.
We are talking about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But, and this is the key, we are explicitly not talking about the grassy knoll or the umbrella man or, the magic bullet trajectory. We're stripping all of that away.
All of it.
To look at the one thing that gets so lost in the noise of conspiracy. The actual biography of the man holding the rifle.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Exactly, because I think for most of us, for me anyway, Oswald is this two-dimensional figure. He's either the lone nut villain from the official story.
Or he's the innocent patsy.
Right. He's a symbol. He's not a human being. But when you sent over the source material for this, the biographical beta, the psychiatric reports from his childhood, the witness testimonies, I just realized I didn't know this guy at all.
And that's a very, very common reaction. Yeah. Oswald is so often treated as a plot device in his own story. But when you actually read the documents, the Warren Commission exhibits or the House Select Committee reports or his own diary, which we have excerpts from, you see a very specific and a very consistent personality pattern emerge.
So that's the mission for this deep dive. We want to try and understand the psychology and the specific movements of Oswald. Not the myth, but the man. And frankly, the man is so much stranger than the myth. The sheer volume of failure in his life is it's staggering.
It is a catalog of rejection from start to finish.
And the fact that he attempted a high-profile political assassination before Kennedy, that was the detail that really, really stuck with me.
The General Walker attempt, I think it's the skeleton key to the whole case. If you can understand why he shot at Walker, you understand Dallas in November.
Okay, so let's get into it. We aren't going to go chronologically just for the sake of it, but because the timeline actually builds this pressure cooker. We have to start with the environment that produced him. And the source material paints a pretty bleak picture of his entry into the world.
It was unstable from day one, or actually from day minus 60. Lee was born in New Orleans in October 1939, but his father, Robert E. Lee Oswald, died of a sudden heart attack 2 months before Lee was even born.
So there's a ghost at the head of the table immediately, no father figure from the very start.
Exactly. And his mother, Marguerite. She is really the central context for his early life. You read the social worker reports of the later testimony from family, and she's described as incredibly difficult. The words you see are self-involved, conflicted, and just. She struggled to maintain any kind of stability whatsoever.
And the stat that just jumped out at me that quantifies that instability was the moving. I moved a few times as a kid, and I hated it. But Oswald, he moved 21 times by the time he was 17.
21 times. And along with that, he attended 12 different schools.
12? That is almost hard to conceptualize. You're never in a classroom long enough to learn the teacher's name, let alone make a single friend.
It guarantees isolation. It's a formula for it. You are perpetually the new kid. You are always on the outside looking in. And for a child who is already, naturally quiet or withdrawn, that creates a barrier between you and the rest of the world that just calcifies over time.
And wasn't there a period where she just couldn't handle it and put him in an orphanage?
Yes, the Bethlehem Orphan Asylum. She put Lee and his 2 older brothers, Robert and John, there for about a year. She claimed she couldn't afford to take care of them, that she needed to work.
But there's a little detail in there that seems really important.
There is. Here's the nuance that matters. She left the older brothers there, but she pulled Lee out early. He was the baby. He was special.
So she creates this dynamic where he is the only one who matters, but he's also a burden that she can just, check into an institution when it's inconvenient.
It was a claustrophobic, confusing bond. The reports say she slept in the same bed with him until he was nearly a teenager. She insisted he was special, that he was smarter than other kids, but she also completely neglected his emotional needs. It created this toxic mix of entitlement and deep, deep resentment.
That resentment seems to boil over in what the notes call the New York incident. This feels like the villain's origin story. He's 12 years old, and they've moved to New York City to live with his half-brother, John Pick.
That's right. And this is the first time we see the fantasy life, the rage, actually manifest as physical violence. There was an argument. We don't know the exact trigger, but Oswald allegedly struck his mother.
He hit her.
He did. And when his half-brother's wife, John's wife, intervened to protect Marguerite, Oswald pulled a pocket knife on her.
A 12-year-old pulling a knife on his sister-in-law. That is not just a temper tantrum. That is a whole different level.
No, and the courts recognized that. He was truant, he was refusing to go to school, so they sent him to a juvenile reformatory, youth house, for observation. And that led to a psychiatric assessment by a Dr. Renatus Hartogs. This report is one of the most critical documents we have on Oswald's personality.
I have the quote here. Hartogs diagnosed him with personality pattern disturbance with schizoid features. Can we break that down? Because schizoid is a word people throw around. What does it actually mean in this context from the 1950s?
Well, in that era's psychiatric terminology, it wasn't about schizophrenia. It referred to a profound detachment from social relationships, a very limited range of emotional expression, and a strong tendency toward solitary activities. He was a loner who couldn't connect. But Hartogs went much further than that.
This is the key part.
This is the key part. He noted that Oswald had a vivid fantasy life, turning around the topics of omnipotence and power.
Omnipotence and power. I mean, that is a heavy, heavy phrase to describe a 12-year-old boy.
It means he felt small and powerless in his real life. No father, no stability, no friends, no money. So he compensated by building a world inside his head where he was a giant. He wanted to be a great man.
Yeah.
He fantasized about controlling the world that was currently controlling him.
The social worker at the time, Evelyn Siegel, had a really sad but sharp observation about him. She called him an emotionally starved, affectionless youngster.
She did, and she actually saw hope for him. This is the tragic part. She recommended probation, but she insisted he get ongoing psychotherapy. She warned, and this is on the record, that if he didn't get help, his behavior would only deteriorate and his detachment from reality would grow.
But he didn't get the help.
No, because just like she did with everything else, Marguerite ran away. Before the court could mandate the therapy, before the system could intervene, she packed Lee up and moved back to New Orleans. She literally fled the solution.
So he falls right back into the cracks. He eventually drops out of school at 17 in the 10th grade, never gets a diploma. But the notes are really clear that he wasn't stupid. In fact, he was reading stuff that most kids his age, even kids in college, wouldn't touch.
Oh, he was a voracious reader. But he wasn't reading for pleasure. He was reading to find a key. He felt the world was broken and unfair, and he was looking for a system, a grand theory that explained why.
And he finds it.
He finds it in the dusty shelves of the New Orleans public libraries. He finds Karl Marx.
Which is just such a bizarre image. It's the mid-1950s, Eisenhower is president, the Cold War is at its absolute peak, and here is this lonely teenager in the Deep South, probably surrounded by crew cuts and patriotism, deciding he is a Marxist.
It was the ultimate rebellion. It was a way to feel intellectually superior to everyone around him. You guys are all living in the delusion of capitalism. I alone know the truth. By the time he's 15, he's writing letters to the Socialist Party of America asking for literature.
So he builds this new identity for himself. I am a Marxist revolutionary. But then he does something that seems to completely, totally contradict that. He joins the United States Marines.
It's the great contradiction of his youth, and it's a pattern we'll see again and again.
So why? I mean, if you hate the American system, if you think it's oppressive, why join the most aggressive arm of its military?
There are really two reasons. The first is simple and practical, to escape his mother. His brother testified that Lee felt he was living under the yoke of oppression with Marguerite. He was 17, he needed a ticket out, and the Marines were that ticket.
And the second reason?
I think the second reason goes back to Dr. Hartog's report. The fantasy of omnipotence and power. Where do you find power in the real world? The military. It's a place of structure, of weapons, of control. I think a part of him was drawn to that, even as his ideology rejected it.
So how did he fit in? I can't imagine this solitary, bookish Marxist vibing well in the barracks.
He absolutely did not. They called him Ozzie Rabbit after a cartoon character, partly because of his name and partly because he was small and quiet. He was mocked. He was an outsider there too. But, and this is critically important for the events of 1963, he was trained.
Okay, let's talk about his shooting skills, because there is a lot of debate. You see it online all the time about whether he was actually a good shot.
The Marine records are very clear. In December 1956, shortly after you joined, he was tested on the shooting range. He scored a 212. That's out of 250. That score qualified him as a sharpshooter.
And what does that mean in layman's terms?
It's the second highest rating you can get. It's a good score. It's definitely above average. It means he was proficient with an M1 Garand rifle at distances up to 500 yards.
But that score went down later, right?
It did. Years later, in 1959, he was retested and he scored a 191. That dropped his rating down to marksman, which is the lowest passing grade.
Which is what a lot of conspiracy theorists point to. See, he was a lousy shot.
Right. But we have to be really careful with that data. A marksman in the United States Marine Corps is still a trained shooter. He knows how to handle a rifle, how to use iron sights, how to lead a target, how to control his breathing, how to maintain a weapon. He wasn't some elite sniper, but he was absolutely not an amateur. He was competent.
And beyond the rifle, he also had a pretty sensitive job, right? A security clearance.
He did. He was a radar operator. He worked in a MACS, a Marine Air Control Squadron. This gave him access to classified information about U.S. aircraft movements, and specifically the locations and altitudes of the U-2 spy planes.
But at the same time, his behavior was getting more and more erratic. I saw a note in the file about him shooting himself.
In the elbow, yes. He was playing with an unauthorized .22 pistol he had smuggled onto the base, and it went off. He was court-martialed for that. He was also court-martialed for a separate incident for fighting with a sergeant who outranked him.
And the jungle incident? That one is so strange.
It's one of those weird telling details. While he was stationed in the Philippines on sentry duty one night, he just fired his rifle off into the dark jungle. He claimed he heard something. No one else did. He was disciplined for that, too.
It sounds like he was trying to create action, trying to make something happen in his boring life.
Or the fantasy life was bleeding into reality again.
Yeah.
He was seeing enemies in the shadows that weren't really there.
So he gets sick of the Marines. He pulls a fast one to get out a few months early, claiming his mother is sick and needs his care, which she wasn't, really. And he gets a hardship discharge. And then he executes what must be the biggest, most audacious plan of his life up to that point. He defects.
October 1959. He'd saved up his Marine pay, about $1,500. He takes this incredibly convoluted route of ships and planes to get to Helsinki, Finland, and then takes the train into Moscow. He walks into his hotel room and announces to his tourist guide that he wants to defect to the Soviet Union.
He expects a parade. He thinks they're going to welcome the American comrade with open arms.
He truly does. He thinks he's a big deal. And instead, they check his visa and tell him it's expiring in 2 days. The KGB looked at him, a 20-year-old high school dropout with a history of instability, and they decided he was totally useless. Or worse, a potential plant. They told him, thanks, but no thanks. Go home.
That rejection must have absolutely shattered him. This was his grand gesture.
It did, and his response was extreme and extremely theatrical. When the tour guide came back to his room to tell him he had to leave, she found him in the bathtub. He had slashed his left wrist.
Was it a genuine suicide attempt, or was it pure theater?
It's debated, but the timing, the superficiality of the cut, it strongly suggests theater. He did it right before she was scheduled to arrive. He wanted to force their hand. He knew the Soviets couldn't just kick out a bleeding, dying American. It would be an international incident.
And it worked.
It worked perfectly. They hospitalized him. They put him under psychiatric observation. The irony. And eventually, the KGB decided it was just easier to let him stay than to deal with the hassle of deporting him.
He even went to the U.S. Embassy in Moscow to, make it official?
Oh, it was a huge dramatic scene. He stormed into the embassy, slammed his U.S. passport on the consul's desk, and announced, "I'm through." He renounced his citizenship. He even threatened to give up his radar secrets about the U-2 spy plane. He wanted to burn the bridge so completely that he could never go back.
So he gets his wish. He is now, for all intents and purposes, living in the Soviet Union, and they send him to Minsk.
Which is not exactly Moscow. It's an industrial city, a provincial capital. They gave him a job at a radio and electronics factory called Gorizont, the Horizon Factory.
And this is where the fantasy of being a revolutionary hero collides head-on with the drab reality of communism.
Exactly. We have his historic diary. That's what he called it, which again speaks volumes about his ego. And he's just complaining constantly. He wrote, "The work is drab." He complained that there was no nightlife. I mean, he specifically complained that there were no bowling alleys or nightclubs.
I have to laugh at that. He defects to the workers' paradise in the middle of the Cold War, and his main complaint is the lack of bowling.
It just shows his incredible immaturity. He liked the idea of communism, the theory of it, but he hated the actual boredom of living in that system. He had a subsidized apartment, he had good pay from the factory, plus a subsidy from the Red Cross. But there was nothing to buy and nothing to do.
But he did find a wife.
He did. Marina Prusakova, she was a 19-year-old pharmacy student. They met at a trade union dance.
And what was the attraction there? What did they see in each other?
Well, for her, Lee was exotic. He was a real American. Even though he was a defector, he represented the West, a different world. She probably thought he was a ticket to a better, more exciting life. For him, having a Russian wife was like a trophy. It was proof that he had successfully integrated into this new world.
And they married really quickly.
Just 6 weeks after they met, it was a whirlwind.
But the bloom came off that rose pretty quickly, too.
Almost immediately. By 1962, the boredom was just unbearable for him. The novelty was gone. He realized he wasn't going to be a leader or an important figure in the Soviet Union. He was just another cog in a drab machine. So he starts the process to go back.
And the U.S. just lets him back in. After he renounced his citizenship and threatened to give away secrets?
They did. It was the height of the Cold War. Bringing a disillusioned defector back was seen as a major propaganda win. See? Even the communists who go there want to come back to America. They actually gave him a loan from the embassy to pay for the travel.
So in June of 1962, he arrives back in the U.S. with Marina and a baby daughter, June. They settle in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And this is where the final slide toward the assassination really begins.
He tries to connect with the local Russian emigre community in Dallas. These are people who had fled Stalin, who had escaped the Soviet Union. They are fiercely, passionately anti-communist.
And Oswald, the genius, walks in talking about how great Marx is and how the Soviet system has its good points.
It was a complete disaster. They hated him. They found him arrogant, rude, and politically naive. They felt sorry for Marina. They saw her as this poor girl trapped with this abusive, delusional little man. They would help her out, give her diapers and food, but they couldn't stand to be in the same room as Lee.
Except for one guy, George de Mohrenschildt.
He is the fascinating exception. De Mohrenschildt was a wealthy, highly educated, worldly geologist, much older. And he found Oswald amusing. He was almost like an anthropological study to him. He told the Warren Commission later that Oswald was surprisingly fluent in Russian and had a sharp, albeit twisted, intellect.
I think de Mohrenschildt is important because he was maybe the only person giving Oswald the kind of intellectual respect he craved so badly.
I think that's right. But even he eventually got tired of Oswald's personality and started to drift away. And as he drifted, Oswald became more isolated and more desperate for a cause, for something to do.
Which brings us to April 1963, the General Walker attempt. I really want to slow down here because, as you said, this completely changes his profile. This isn't just a theory, it's a documented act.
General Edwin Walker was a major public figure in Dallas at the time. He was a retired U.S. Army general who had actually been relieved of command for promoting right-wing political literature to his troops. After retiring, he became a staunch segregationist and a virulent anti-communist speaker.
So, to Oswald's mind, he was basically the personification of American fascism.
Exactly. He was the perfect target. Oswald started fixating on him. He saw Walker as the leader of a dangerous, burgeoning fascist movement in America.
So he decides to kill him. How much planning went into this? Was it an impulsive act of rage?
No, it was highly premeditated. This was not a bar fight. This was a planned political assassination. Oswald ordered a rifle by mail, a 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano, from an ad in American Rifleman magazine.
The same rifle he'd use later.
The very same rifle. He paid $19.95 plus shipping.
Yeah.
He also ordered a revolver at the same time.
And he used an alias to buy it.
Yes, A.J. Heidel. He had a post office box set up under that name, which is where the weapons were sent. And he didn't just buy the gun. He staked out Walker's house. We know this because police later found photographs he had taken of Walker's home and the alley behind it among his possessions. He studied the bus routes to plan his escape.
And the note, this is the smoking gun for his mindset at the time.
On the night of the attempt, April 10th, he left a multi-page note for Marina, written in Russian. It didn't mention Walker by name, but it gave her detailed instructions. If I am arrested, if I don't return. It detailed where his money was hidden, how to handle the rent. It was a soldier's final letter before a mission.
So walk us through the attempt itself.
Walker was at home, sitting at his desk in his study, working on his taxes. Behind him was a window facing the alley. Oswald was outside in the darkness, maybe 100 feet away, aiming that $20 rifle. He fired one shot.
And he missed.
Barely, by less than an inch. The bullet struck the wooden frame of the window sash. It deflected just enough to miss Walker's head, though fragments of the bullet and wood flew into the room and struck Walker's arm. He had minor injuries.
That is terrifyingly close. A fraction of an inch, and history is different.
It is. Walker thought a rock had been thrown at the window at first. Oswald turned and ran. He hid the rifle wrapped in a blanket near some railroad tracks and took a bus home. He came in the door, white as a sheet according to Marina's testimony, and confessed to her, I shot Walker.
And Marina didn't turn him in. She didn't go to the police.
She was terrified. You have to put yourself in her shoes. She's a Soviet citizen in Cold War America. She barely speaks English. She has a baby. And her husband has just confessed to trying to kill a famous general. She thought they would both be deported or imprisoned. She made him promise never to do it again.
This event is so critical because it proves he was a hunter of fascists, which explains those bizarre backyard photos.
Right. Around this same time, March of '63, he had Marina take these now infamous pictures of him in their backyard. He's dressed all in black, holding the Carcano rifle in one hand and two communist newspapers, the Militant and the Worker in the other. And he has the revolver holstered on his hip.
It looks like a cosplay photo for a revolutionary. It's so performative.
It is completely performative. He sent a copy to a friend with the inscription written on it, Hunter of Fascists. Ha ha ha.
That laugh, ha ha ha. It's almost supervillain territory. It's chilling.
It shows that he was actively creating a persona for himself. He wasn't just Lee, the warehouse worker. He was an avenger. He was a historical force. The Walker attempt proves, beyond any doubt, that he didn't need a conspiracy or a handler to plan and execute political violence. He had his own agenda.
So after Walker survives, Oswald gets spooked. He thinks the police might be on to him. So he packs up and moves the family to New Orleans in April of '63. And this begins what the source material calls the Summer of Discontent.
He tries to reinvent himself again. He gets a job, loses it, and then he decides he's going to become a major pro-Castro activist. He decides to open a New Orleans chapter of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Which sounds very official, like a real organization.
It was a complete and total sham. He was the only member. He wrote to the National FPCC headquarters in New York claiming he had a thriving chapter. He printed his own flyers. He even signed membership cards for his one-man chapter. A.J. Hidell is the chapter president and Lee Oswald is the secretary. He was role-playing an entire organization.
He was his own boss and his own employee. He even hired people to help him hand out flyers, right?
Yes, he paid a couple of guys he found at the local unemployment office to stand on street corners with him and distribute his pro-Castro literature. And that is what led to the street corner confrontation with Carlos Brigne.
And Brigne was a prominent anti-Castro Cuban exile.
That's right. And what's wild is that Oswald had actually approached Brigne days earlier, pretending to be anti-Castro himself, trying to infiltrate the exile groups.
Oh.
So when Brigne saw this same guy on the street handing out hands-off Cuba flyers, he went ballistic. They got into a scuffle. The police were called.
And Oswald got arrested for disturbing the peace. But he didn't seem upset about it at all.
He seemed to enjoy it. This was the attention he craved. He immediately requested to be interviewed by the FBI, and then he managed to get himself invited onto a local radio station, WDSU, for a debate about Cuba.
This is one of the only times we can actually hear his voice.
We have the recording.
Yeah.
And he sounds calm. He sounds surprisingly articulate. He's using all the Marxist buzzwords he's read in his books. And you can just hear the satisfaction in his voice. For those 20 minutes, he was the center of attention. He was the important man he always wanted to be.
But the radio debate didn't spark a revolution in New Orleans.
No. It barely made a ripple. Dallas ignored him. New Orleans ignored him. So he decided he had to aim higher. He decided he needed to go to Cuba and fight for the revolution personally.
This is the Mexico City trip, September 1963, just 2 months before the assassination.
He takes a bus from Houston to Laredo, crosses the border, and takes another long bus ride down to Mexico City. He walks into the Cuban consulate and demands a transit visa that will let him travel to the Soviet Union by way of Cuba.
And he brings a whole dossier of his activities, right? The flyers, the newspaper clippings about his arrest, his fake membership cards.
He lays it all out on the desk like it's a resume. Look at me, look at my credentials. I am a soldier for the cause.
And the Cubans are not impressed.
It was a spectacular disaster. The consulate officials found him volatile, arrogant, and just. Strange. They called the Soviet embassy to check on his story, and the Soviets said, "This kind of visa usually takes 4 months to process." Oswald started shouting. He got into a screaming match with the consul, a man named Eusebio Askew.
And Askew actually told him off, didn't he? The famous line.
Askew told him, quote, "A person like you is doing harm to the Cuban Revolution." He essentially told him he was a liability, a nut, and he kicked him out.
That has to be the final nail in the coffin for his ego. He is rejected by the U.S. Marines, rejected by the Soviet Union, rejected by the anti-communist Russians in Dallas, and now, finally, rejected by Castro's Cuba, the very people he's championing.
He returns to Dallas in early October 1963 as a man with absolutely no options left.
Yeah.
He is broke. His wife is pregnant with her second child and is living with a Quaker friend, Ruth Payne, because she can't stand living with him anymore. He is completely, totally alone.
And he needs a job, any job. And Ruth Payne hears about an opening at a warehouse through a neighbor.
The Texas School Book Depository. He starts work there on October 16th for $1.25 an hour filling book orders.
It's just so mundane. He's just a guy filling orders in a warehouse. And then history aligns. The universe puts the pieces on the board. When did he find out the presidential motorcade was going to be passing right by his building?
The full motorcade route was published in the Dallas newspapers on Tuesday, November 19th. Oswald would have seen that the president's car was scheduled to make a slow turn directly in front of his workplace.
So he had roughly 3 days to process this information and form a plan.
Yes. And on Thursday, November 21st, he breaks his routine. Normally, he stayed in a rooming house in Dallas during the week and would go to Ruth Payne's house in Irving to see his family on Friday nights. But that Thursday, he asked a coworker, Wesley Frazier, for a lift out to Irving.
Did Frazier ask him why he was going home on a Thursday?
He did. Oswald said he needed to pick up some curtain rods to put up in his room.
Curtain rods.
Yeah.
Probably the most famous lie in American history.
The next morning, Friday the 22nd, Oswald gets in Frazier's car for the ride to work. He puts a long, bulky brown paper package in the back seat. Frazier asks him what it is. Oswald says curtain rods.
Frazier later testified that Oswald was incredibly quiet during that drive into work. Just silent.
Barely spoke a word. Walked ahead of Frazier into the building.
And he left something important behind in Irving that morning.
2 things.
Yeah.
He left his wedding ring in a little cup on the dresser, and he left $170 in cash. Basically, his life savings from Marina. He did not expect to come back.
So he's at work. He goes up to the 6th floor. He spends part of the morning building a sniper's nest, moving boxes of books around to create a screen to shield him from view from the rest of the floor.
There were other employees on that floor earlier in the morning, but they all went down for lunch around 11:45. Oswald told a coworker he was going to stay up there and eat. He stayed behind, alone.
12:30 p.m. The shots ring out. Now, we are not going to dissect the ballistics here, but I want to focus on what happens in the immediate aftermath, because this, to me, speaks directly to that schizoid diagnosis from all those years ago.
The chaos in Dealey Plaza is absolute. People screaming, sirens wailing. Marion Baker, a motorcycle cop, runs into the depository building immediately. He runs up the stairs with the building superintendent, Roy Truly. On the 2nd floor, in the lunchroom, they spot Oswald.
And this is maybe 90 seconds after the president's head was blown off 6 floors above.
Baker points his revolver directly at Oswald. Oswald doesn't flinch. He doesn't panic. He doesn't look surprised. He is standing calmly at the vending machine, drinking a Coca-Cola.
Drinking a Coke.
He wasn't out of breath from running down 4 flights of stairs. He wasn't shaking. He was just there.
Yeah.
Baker asks, Truly, do you know this man? Truly says, yes, he works here. So Baker lowers his gun, says, okay, and continues up the stairs looking for a shooter. Oswald was let go.
That level of calm is just chilling. It's almost reptilian. It's like a switch has been flipped.
It suggests a complete and total dissociation from the act. He had just committed the crime of the century, and he was taking his soda break.
He just walks out the front door in the confusion.
Walks right out. He walks about 7 blocks east. He gets on a city bus, but the traffic is gridlocked because of the assassination. So he gets off the bus, asks the driver for a transfer ticket, and then grabs a taxi.
He takes the taxi to his rooming house in Oak Cliff.
His housekeeper, Earlene Roberts, sees him rush in. He goes to his room, grabs a light-colored jacket and his .38 revolver. He rushes back out without a word. She sees him standing at the bus stop for a moment, and then he just starts walking away.
He seems to be drifting. He doesn't have a clear escape plan anymore. The curtain rods plan only got him as far as the shooting. Now he's just improvising.
He's walking through the Oak Cliff neighborhood. It's about 1:01 p.m. now. Officer J.D. Tippit is patrolling the area in his squad car. He gets the radio broadcast with a description of the suspect based on Howard Brennan's sighting from the depository window. White male, roughly 30, 5'10", slender. Oswald fits the description. Tippit pulls his squad car over to check him out.
Tippit gets out of the car. He doesn't have his gun drawn. He's just walking around the hood of his car toward Oswald.
And Oswald doesn't wait to talk. He doesn't try to run. He just draws his revolver and fires 4 shots across the hood of the car. Tippit was hit multiple times and went down immediately. He didn't stand a chance.
This is the moment that, for me, completely destroys the patsy argument. If Oswald is an innocent man who has been framed for the crime of the century, why does he execute a police officer in broad daylight 45 minutes later?
It is the action of a desperate man who has nothing left to lose. He shoots Tippit, Then, according to witnesses, he walks over and fires another shot into Tippit's head to make sure he's dead. Then he turns and runs. Multiple witnesses see him emptying the spent shells from the revolver and reloading as he runs down the street.
He ducks into the entryway of a shoe store for a second to hide as police sirens get closer. Then he sees the Texas Theater up the block.
The ticket booth lady, Julia Postal, sees him slip past the entrance and go into the theater without paying. The shoe store manager, who saw him hiding, follows him and points him out. They call the police.
And the movie playing was War is Hell. You just can't make this stuff up.
The house lights go up in the theater. The police swarm in. Officer Nick McDonald approaches Oswald, who is sitting alone in the back row.
Does Oswald surrender peacefully?
He says, well, it's all over now. But as McDonald goes to search him, he punches McDonald in the face and draws the gun. He pulls the trigger.
He tried to kill another cop.
You did. But the hammer of the revolver came down on the webbing of Officer McDonald's hand, which was between the hammer and the firing pin. It didn't fire. They wrestled him to the ground. And as they dragged him out, Oswald started shouting, "I am not resisting arrest. I am a victim of police brutality."
The switch is flipped again. The hunter of fascists who just murdered 2 people is gone, and the victim is back.
Exactly. By the time he gets to the police station, he is fully in character as the innocent, confused working man who's been caught up in something he doesn't understand.
Let's talk about the interrogation. Because he held out for 2 days, he gave them nothing.
He was incredibly arrogant. He sparred with the detectives. When they showed him the infamous backyard photo with the rifle, he laughed and said it was a fake, that they had superimposed his head on someone else's body, which forensic science later proved was a lie.
And then there's the patsy line, the line that launched 1,000 theories.
As he was being paraded before the press, he shouted, "They've taken me in because I lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy." It was a brilliant line. It was short, it was memorable, and it immediately fed into the paranoia that this was some kind of big Cold War plot. But notice what he admits to. Absolutely nothing. He denies owning the rifle. He denies the curtain rod story. He changes it to say he brought his lunch to work.
But he did get caught on one tiny contradiction.
When they asked him about his politics, he very pointedly corrected the officers. "I am not a communist," he said. "I am a Marxist." Even while facing the electric chair for assassinating the president, it was important to him that they got his ideology right.
And then, Sunday morning, November 24th.
They're trying to move him from the city jail to the more secure county jail. Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner with a savior complex and loose mob ties, steps out of the crowd of reporters in the basement garage. One shot, point blank to the abdomen. Live on national television. Millions of people saw it happen. Oswald groans and collapses. The great man who craved a place in history dies on a concrete floor in a police station basement.
And it effectively sealed the case in amber. Because there was no trial, there was no public presentation of evidence, there was no closure.
It created the vacuum that all the conspiracy theories rushed in to fill, and they've been filling it ever since.
I want to touch on one last thing from the notes, because this story just keeps getting weirder even after he's dead. The coffin.
Ah, the coffin controversy, yes. Yeah. In 1981, a British author published a book claiming that the man buried in Oswald's grave wasn't Oswald at all, but a Soviet spy imposter who had taken his place years earlier.
And Oswald's widow, Marina, actually supported an exhumation.
She did. She wanted to put the rumors to rest. So in October 1981, they dug him up. Robert Oswald, Lee's brother, was there. They opened the casket, and the body was in a poor state, but they were able to use the skull to check his dental records against his Marine records. It was Lee. The dental records matched perfectly. The imposter theory was dead.
But the coffin itself, that became a whole other story.
The original pine coffin was badly water damaged and was falling apart. So they transferred Oswald's body to a new one and reburied him. But the funeral home that handled the exhumation kept the old rotting coffin.
Why on earth would they do that?
To sell it. Years later, they put it up for auction, and it sold for over $87,000.
That is just unbelievably macabre.
Robert Oswald sued them. He was furious that they were trying to profiteer off his brother's misery and infamy. A judge eventually agreed and ordered the coffin returned to the family. It was presumably destroyed.
It really highlights how radioactive this man's legacy is. Even his garbage is worth a fortune.
He achieved his goal, in a way. He wanted to be immortal. He wanted the world to study him, to analyze him, and talk about him, and we are.
So when we pull back and look at the whole picture, the lonely kid in the Bronx with fantasies of power, the failed Marine, the failed defector, the failed husband, the failed revolutionary, what do you see?
I see a man who was desperate for significance. He tried to find it in the Marines and failed. He tried to find it in the Soviet Union and failed. He tried to find it by killing General Walker, and he failed. He was a collector of failures.
But on November 22nd, 1963, he didn't fail.
History presented him with a target of opportunity, the ultimate target. He had the rifle, he had the perfect vantage point from that window, and he had a lifetime of rage and resentment built up inside him. He didn't need a conspiracy, he just needed to be lucky once.
It leaves me thinking about that moment in Mexico City, just a few weeks before, when the Cuban official, Eusebio Askew, yelled at him and kicked him out of the consulate.
That's the hinge point.
If Askew had just been in a better mood that day, if he had stamped that visa and said yes, Oswald would have been on a boat to Havana in November 1963.
And John F. Kennedy would almost certainly have finished his term. The Vietnam War might have looked completely different. The civil rights movement might have played out differently. An entire timeline of history changes.
The margins are just terrifyingly thin. The fate of the world was determined by a bureaucrat's bad mood and a $20 mail-order rifle.
That, I think, is the scariest thought of all.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a heavy one, but I feel like I finally maybe understand the ghost in the machine a little better.
Always the human element, isn't it? That's what explains the unexplained.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.